list of personal emoluments. This is the intervention that the minister, they've already responded to this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable Mutu. Honorable Mabumba, is that your hand? Okay.
Chair, for me, colleagues, after you had the conversation with the minister in terms of item on page 5, on strengthening the institutional framework, as well as on the education statistical bulletin, what commitments did the minister make? Because I think you have realized that obviously if the key documents in the minister are not available, then the question is how are they allocating the resources? So when you interacted with the minister or with the ministry officials, what commitments are they making, maybe probably in terms of time frame, to finish the education policy as well as the education sector plan, which documents probably are either been overtaken by events and so forth. And then also on the statistical bulletin, as you have realized that if we members of parliament and the Zambian people have to get realistic statistics on how that particular ministry is performing, the education statistical bulletin is very critical. So in between these, this education statistical bulletin, as well as the education documents, number one, the education policy, the education sector plan, what sort of commitment did they make to have them completed? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. You can respond to that.
Thank you, Chair. I'll respond to the question regarding the statistical bulletin. Indeed, the ministry acknowledged that this was impacting on their operations and that they made a commitment that 2024 they will ensure that the statistical bulletin is published.
Thank you, Vice Chairperson and your team. We'll end here. Cap 12 of the laws of Zambia in terms of the provision that which was given to you on the immunity. Also, we end here. Do have a good day. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks so much. My full names are Mishek Mtetwa Nyambose. I'm from Ezuleni village, Chief Pikamaraza. My father was Mr. Davison Mtetwa Mishek Nyambose. My mother was from Lupafia village.
For the expanded planning and budgeting committee, where we are looking at the 2024 annual budget as pronounced by the Minister of Finance and National Planning, and as always we do pleasure your coming to such issues. Any questions to ask at that time, then we can do introductions looking at the team. So let's allow just our colleagues from Bank of Zambia to do introductions, and then we'll start.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, honorable members. My name is Francis Chipimo. I'm the Deputy Governor of Operations.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair. Good afternoon, honorable members. My name is Reka Chifuya Muhango, Deputy Governor Administration.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, honorable members. My name is Guson Kataya from the Bank Supervision Department.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, honorable Chair and members of Parliament. I'm Jonathan Chipiri, Director responsible for economics. Thank you.
Good afternoon, honorable Chair and honorable members of Parliament. My name is Emmanuel Palm, advisor to the Governor.
Thank you. We have other members.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair. Good afternoon, honorable members. My name is Bess Nakmwanza, Assistant Director Communications at the Bank of Zambia.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair. Good afternoon, honorable members. My name is Owen Moka. I'm Executive Assistant to the Deputy Governor of Operations.
Good afternoon, honorable members. My name is Prudence Sakaba, Executive Assistant to the Deputy Governor.
Thank you. And my name is Fred Jatila, Member of Parliament for Momba constituency, also the chairperson for the Expanded Planning and Budgeting Committee. Apart from the honorable members of this committee, we also have our colleagues from the Parliamentary Budget Office and also our colleagues from the Office of the Clerk who are helping us with some work. Deputy Governor Operations, thank you very much once again for coming. In terms of the provisions capped off of the laws of Zambia, they'll give you immunity as and when you are appearing before a committee of parliament such as this one, meaning that whatever you say was appearing in the committee, that which you say cannot be used against you in any court of law. So we are conferring you with that provision. However, the same provision works against you in an event that you were to deliberately mislead the committee. We do have your submission, sir, with your team. And we are asking if you can take us through your document, say maximum of say 25 minutes, if you need all of it, and after that maybe just about 15-20 minutes for the members to ask questions, and then we'll be done. You can start as and when you are ready. Thank you.
Good afternoon again, Honorable Chair, and good afternoon, honorable members. First of all, Honorable Chair, let me just begin by...
sorry, Deputy Governor, I'm also informed that we have just started now. We are live on both Parliament TV and Parliament Radio. Sorry about that. You can start.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, so no pressure on me. Honorable Chair, firstly, let me begin by conveying an apology from Governor Kalialia. He's not in the country, and I believe he had communicated to yourself, so...
Yeah, he communicated.
It's not that he couldn't be here. Honorable Chair, as always, really it's an honor and privilege for us at the bank to appear before the committee. In this instance, you have asked us to share our comments on the 2024 national budget, which was presented in September. And there are several issues which you have asked us to reflect on. The proposed monetary policy to underpin the 2024 budget, and then there's comments on factors underpinning the 2024 macroeconomic objectives. You also want us to talk a bit about the fiscal deficit and public debt management, debt, as well as strategies to enhance economic resilience from external vulnerabilities, amongst other things. Chair, honorable members, the theme of the national budget was unlocking economic potential. From our vantage point, the budget really presents the government's plans to promote economic growth through enhanced private sector investment, increased production and productivity, as well as improving public service delivery. Chair, it represents the commitment by the government to provide the policy framework, the resources and incentives which should help unlock the economic potential of the country and build on the foundation which has been laid for macroeconomic stability and sustainable growth. The other point which I should mention is that there is also the issue of making sure that as we grow the economy, we are not leaving anybody behind, and so the budget also speaks to social sector spending and programs. Chair, I think it would be remiss of us not to make the point, however, that the budget is really presented in the context of some significant economic challenges, and these include the relatively low growth, especially when you think about the Vision 2030 aspirations of becoming a middle-income country. There is also the issue of infrastructure deficits, especially in the rural areas, and then the issue of the high cost of living for the Zambian people. So these are all significant challenges which the budget is presented against. Chair, we had made a detailed submission, but perhaps allow me just for time to go through the PowerPoint presentation, and then we can perhaps leave more time for questions.
Okay. Do we have? Okay.
Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine.
Oh, okay. So maybe let me first begin with the first issue of the monetary policy underpinning the 2024 budget. So, Chair, as is really our mandate, the target in the 2024 budget for monetary policy is really to reduce inflation to within the target band of 6 to 8%. Chair, as we have always said, we think this is really critical because inflation really represents a tax on those who are fixed income, and very often it is the poor who are fixed income and are least able to address the punitive measures of inflation. So we think that reducing inflation to single digits is very, very important for us. Chair, this target is also consistent with the other macroeconomic objectives which have been announced in terms of the fiscal deficit as well as limiting borrowing. And these two issues, of course, also help us on the monetary policy side. If we are lower deficits, there's more money available for businesses to borrow through the banking system. But equally importantly, lower fiscal deficits should mean that we can push down the cost of government borrowing, and to the extent that this is what the commercial banks will often use as a reference point or opportunity cost in making their pricing decisions. As this is lowered, we expect to see that lending rates may also come down. And Chair, if we recall, soon after the HIPC agreement, we saw strengthening of the fiscal deficits, we saw a reduction in government yield rates, we saw an increase in credit as the commercial banks turned to the private sector. So this is really what we are looking to achieve in the 2024 budget. Chair, in terms of the inflation performance, I think really make reference to the last monetary policy meeting we had in August. Clearly, inflation for much of the year, I think to July, was around 10 percentage points, but I think in August and September, we've seen it jump up to 12%. It was 10.8%, I think, in August and 12% in September. And this has really been pushed very much by what is happening on the food side, as well as what we've seen in terms of the exchange rate, and that feeds through also into not just imported inflation, but fuel prices and so on. So these are really the context within which we see inflation, but we are determined to make sure that we can achieve our medium-term target of getting inflation back to 6 to 8%. And we intend to use all the tools at our disposal to help achieve this. Chair, it's important also to just mention that there are risks to the inflation, and these are really relating to energy and food price increases, which have external factor drivers such as the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And on this, we can now add potentially what is happening now in the Middle East, to the extent that that is not contained, and it incorporates countries which are big oil producers. We may see that as an increasing risk on oil prices, but for now it seems that that is not occurring, but that is a risk. The other issue is inflation does remain high in the rest of the world, and central banks have responded by tightening their monetary policy, and this raises financial costs for us in the emerging markets. It also means that very often prices of US dollar interest rates, for example, which you would not have thought of during the depth of COVID, or 4% going to 5% now on government yield rates, that becomes a challenge for us, because then those markets are more attractive for people to invest in. So that is also another challenge in terms of the global financial conditions. And then, of course, there's the issue of supply of maize, not just in Zambia, but in the region as well, due to the adverse weather conditions. So that's another challenge which has to be addressed. Chair, so those are really the key issues on the monetary policy front. In terms of the issues around the macroeconomic objectives and what are the factors underpinning it, I think the way we made our submission was really to just look at the assumptions which the minister announced in the budget and how do these relate to the work that we do. So there were a couple of assumptions. There was the issue of growth, 4.8%. There was the inflation, which I've just talked about. There was a question of us making sure that we can keep international reserves above 3 months of import cover. There was a question of domestic resource mobilization, specifically that revenue should be at least 22% of GDP. And then there was the issue of how we reduce domestic borrowing to 2.5% of GDP. So if I start with the issue of growth, in the PowerPoint presentation on page 5, I think there we show that obviously in the red dotted line there, for 2023, the projection in the budget was that, and this is chart 1 I'm referring to, the projection in the budget was that growth would drop to 2.7%, and then we see recovery in 2024, and then to about 4.8%, and then averaging around 4.6% over the medium term. Chair, I should stress that in the last numbers which were submitted by Zamstats, it looks like perhaps there may be an upward revision to the 2023 number if we just look at what they've given us in the first 2 quarters. So I think we'll wait and see when the final numbers are out for 2023. But for now, the forecast was of quite a significant drop. And driving this drop was really a reduced production in mining, particularly over the first half of the year. And that was a key driver. But again, over the second half of the year, I think we've seen a significant pickup, and that's why I made the point that we may see some revisions to that. In terms of 2024, of course, we are hoping that with the policy measures which have taken place and the investment commitments which seem to be made in mining sector, for example, that we expect to see more growth there. We are also seeing reforms in agriculture, manufacturing, and as well as the drive in tourism. These were all issues which the minister talked to in terms of promoting investments. So we expect to see that we will have more growth underpinning the 2024 budget. In terms of inflation, I think I've talked about the basic target that we have, but maybe just to make reference to page 6, again, chart 2, where we show the projections which we presented at the August MPC. And the point here is that that chart is really showing that at that time we were expecting that we would see a pickup in inflation over the 3rd and 4th quarter, but that it would then decline thereafter. But the basic message there was that it still remains outside of the 6 to 8% band, and so we are going to obviously have to work to make sure that we can reduce inflation. Now obviously some of the issues which have to be dealt with there are not just issues of monetary policy. I think it's very clear that maize is a big driver of inflation, and obviously that requires supply side response, and so the efforts which are being made to boost production and boost exports in this sector, we think are things which help inflation, but also to the extent that we boost exports, obviously also help export earnings and supply of foreign exchange to the market. So those are all important supporting policy measures which we think will be very important in helping us to reduce inflation. Chair, on the external sector side, there are also issues relating to the maintenance of international reserves to above 3 months of import cover. In June, we're reporting that the ratio is about 2.9 months of import cover. I think since then we've seen some improvement in that number. The basic tools we're using to do this is, firstly, we continue to purchase mining taxes from the mining sector. We continue to purchase gold also from one of the mining companies. And the third point, of course, is when we do have opportunities to purchase foreign exchange from the market, we do so as well. The only other point which is important to mention is that the 3 months of import cover is there, yes, but in terms of the IMF program, I think by 2025 we were thinking of having 5 months of import cover, but perhaps more importantly, in the context of commitments we've made under the SADC and our regional groupings, typically that is about 6 months of import cover, which is what we are hoping to achieve. So that's quite a way to go, but that is the challenge which we have. And we think that that's important, Chair, because at the end of the day, having a good reserves does two things for us. One, it helps us to meet shocks which may arise. So use of those reserves in those particular periods can help you avoid very strong adjustments in the economy, which might actually do long-term damage. Of course, we have a flexible exchange rate, which also helps us to absorb these shocks, but having international reserves so that we can meet demand, it might be fuel, it might be food, is important. The other aspect is that having strong reserves does help in terms of people having confidence in the foreign exchange market, that when they do require foreign exchange, that foreign exchange broadly is available in case you did have shocks. So it does help confidence. So we think that building up reserves is something which is very, very important for us to do. The next point was really on domestic revenue, and I'm sure this is something which more competently would be dealt with by ZRA and the ministry, but here we're just recognizing that there is a steady plan to increase revenue, 22% of GDP. We see this coming from, firstly, benefiting from the higher growth which we are expecting to see, but also from administrative changes which are being made at ZRA in terms of the use of ICT and technology, in terms of having better coordination across government systems, in terms of sharing information, and we hope that this will help us to improve tax administration and tax compliance. The other issue, of course, is we do recognize that ZRA will join the Global Forum on Tax Transparency and Exchange of Information for Tax Purposes, and that this also will help in terms of dealing with issues of tax avoidance. The next point was really on the fiscal deficit. Again, a deficit of 4.8% of GDP is what is projected. Chair, we also have a graph here showing two aspects of the deficit. This is on page 9 and it's chart 4. The first one is the blue line on the left. It shows the deficit as a percentage of GDP, in other words, the value of goods and services produced in a year. And here we see the rapid rise which took place really from 2012 up until 2020, where it peaked at 14.2% of GDP, and then we see now a very sharp contraction which has taken place down to 5.8% in 2023, which is the projection for the year, and then 4.8% for 2024. The copper bars are now showing another aspect of the deficit, which is what is the amount of increase in outstanding government securities which took place in this period. And again, you see it basically follows that deficit. It's another way of thinking about it. But this would be basically the kwachas which were essentially borrowed. And we see it peaking again in 2021. And this has fallen significantly up to 2023. So the basic message for us here is that very strong performance in terms of consolidation of the deficit, and we think that this will have the benefits which I mentioned in terms of freeing up space for the private sector, lowering the cost of borrowing, and therefore supporting economic growth. Of course, this must be put in the context of other policy measures which will be taken both on the government side but also on the reform side in the Bank of Zambia, and I'll talk a bit about credit guarantee and other measures which we hope to introduce to help that process. The second point was really similar to that, so I don't need to repeat it. It's just that obviously we hope to limit domestic borrowing to about 2.5% of GDP. That deficit I talked about talks about both foreign borrowing and domestic borrowing, and in the budget you could see that it was basically split 50-50. So again, that should help us to help create conditions in which the private sector can borrow and grow and create jobs for people. A natural follow-on from this is the question you asked about the fiscal deficit and public debt management. Obviously, when we talk about the drop in the deficit as a percentage of GDP, in practical terms, the deficit is growing, but it is growing at a, I mean, the borrowing, the absolute level of borrowing is growing, but it is growing at a much, much lower level than the production of goods and services in the economy. So we think that the decline in the deficit is very important. It means that the stock of domestic debt, both public and private, we see that growth also being curtailed quite significantly. We believe that the numbers in the deficit are aligned with what has been put on the external side in the annual borrowing plan, which is something which we had appeared before you on. And again, as I've already said, on the domestic side, we think that that reduction in the level of borrowing is going to be very, very important to making sure that debt is sustainable. And all of these things, of course, must be seen in the context of the debt restructuring program, which the government has implemented, and this is turning to page 12 in our slides. Here, I think we're really repeating what was announced in the June, the MOU, when the MOU with the Official Creditor Committee was achieved, and here we're simply outlining what was given then. Of course, the next step is also to get achievement with the other creditors, and those are the bondholders as well as the other non-bonded creditors, and that is work which has been undertaken by the Ministry of Finance, and they are really the most appropriate body to talk about those specific details. But I think what we can share, again, this is publicly shared information, when we look at the debt owed to private lenders in relation to the debt restructuring, clearly on page 13 we're showing the distribution of the outstanding debt to official bilateral creditors, the multilaterals, the commercial Eurobonds, as well as the other creditors there. As at the end of June, the commercial and Eurobond holders accounted for about 42% of external debt. The commercial creditors, from the agreement which we reached, the MOU, we are expected to comply with the comparability principle under the common framework, the G20 common framework, although that is now the G21, with the inclusion of the Africa Union. And this means that basically they should offer similar treatment as what has been given to bilateral creditors. And here it's important to note that it is similar treatment, not necessarily the same treatment, but they should be comparable. And so that is work which is ongoing, and I'm sure the Ministry of Finance will be speaking to that as things develop. In terms of the strategy to enhance economic resilience from external vulnerabilities, Chair, there's nothing really new here. I think these are issues we've always talked about. We do need to boost our exports. We do need to diversify our exports, building on the advantages we know we have. Yes, we have copper and other minerals, but we know we have agriculture, we know we have tourism, and basically the budget, I think, outlines ways in which this is going to be done at scale, because I think the issue is now, can we look to being a regional powerhouse in this sector of exports? And we hope that the plans which have been put in place will come to fruition. And again, this will also help us to build our international reserves for the reasons which I have already mentioned. In terms of the other aspects of the budget which you have not asked for but which we thought we should mention relating to us, so the first is that the Bank of Zambia Act 2022 is now operational. One of the areas which it improved was the question of financial stability, and so there is a Financial Stability Committee which is established. So we're now working to ensure that that is fully operational as we start 2024. Chair, in the budget there was also mention that we are going to extend the electronic balance of payment system which we use, which basically is tracking all transactions between Zambia and the rest of the world. We want to now incorporate the export proceeds so that we can